Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I am here with State Representative Andy Fugate, who represents District 94 and is also the minority floor leader in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Have a little bit of a frog in my throat, still a lingering cough and congestion from COVID, which I'm 4 weeks away from now. But so I'm drinking a little pineapple juice tonight. I've been told by my friends who speak for a living that pineapple juice is the best thing you can drink. So normally it's orange juice for me.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I didn't know that you got coronavirus a few weeks ago, but
Yeah.
At least now you're feeling better, I hope.
I've been very trying to be very protective of myself, masking, and I'm vaxxed and boosted, but I had a close encounter with a close relative of mine who's been in and out of the hospital, my older brother. And I've been playing taxi service for him, and he wound up with COVID, and we had an extended period where we were together. And so I wound up with COVID. I technically had a mild case of COVID because I wasn't hospitalized.
Yeah.
Yay. But boy, I tell you what, I don't wish that sore throat on anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't gotten it yet. Knock on all the wood. But it seems pretty bad. Most of my friends who have had it, which is pretty much most of my friends at this point, yeah, they didn't like it. I think most of them were only sick for about a week or so, but some of them were sick for like 2 or 3 weeks, and it's pretty bad. But yeah. So,
Whoa. Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of the video.
what is going on so far this session, and what all do you think is going to end up happening with some of these bills and whatnot?
Well, let's start with the beginning. This was first week of session, and we always start with the State of the State address, which the governor presents to a joint session of the House and Senate. So we convened, and then we dispensed with a couple of things, one of which was a vote to decide whether or not Kyle Hilbert, who's the nominee from the GOP, or Cindy Munson, who was the nominee from the Democratic Party, would be the next Speaker Pro Tem. That's the number 2 spot in the House. For those who may not know, Terry O'Donnell, Representative O'Donnell from Catoosa, stepped out of the Speaker Pro Tem position because of an ongoing investigation into a situation with he and his wife and a tag agency. And so he stepped down from that position, leaving it open. Ultimately, my colleagues selected Kyle Hilbert, a sharp young man from Bristow, Oklahoma, to be the Speaker Pro Tem, but they had a terrific choice in Representative Munson. I was one of 2 who gave a nominating speech for her, and I was proud to stand up for her. Anyway, after that, the governor came in and spoke. I didn't keep a stopwatch on it, but I read later that it was about 50 minutes long, and that doesn't surprise me. I have watched the State of the State address going all the way back to David Walters, and I may have caught 1 or 2 from Henry Bellman. I'm an old guy. And I have never seen anything like that, what he presented in my life. I was just astonished at how divisive and bitter and rancorous it was. Now, the State of the State address is supposed to be where we come together, we talk about what's best in Oklahoma and how we move forward as a state, not how one side talks about how they can win. And, that's not the purpose of the State of the State. And it was shameful to watch the governor turn it into that kind of a clown show. I saw David Holt, Mayor Holt from Oklahoma City, portion of his acceptance speech after he won his election on Tuesday. And I got to say that qualified as a state of the state address, talking about how we move forward as one city, not Republican, not Democrat, not red, not blue, not purple, but as Oklahoma City people. And that's the message the governor should have been giving, is we are Oklahoma. Here's what we will do as Oklahoma, not what we're going to do with the supermajority, not, attacking the tribes and attacking the teachers. And it was like a Festivus speech. It was just airing of grievances, and it was shameful. So first week of session, and actually the first 4 weeks of session are primarily dedicated to committee work. And then weeks 5 and 6, and this year it's going to be one additional week, will be work on the floor. And that's when the committee work is all done and all the bills are supposed to have been heard. We added an extra week because of spring break. We wanted to allow members with kids and things who were planning to do some spring break activities to be able to be away from the Capitol. So that's why the deadline moved. This first week was really mostly about the appropriations process, the very beginnings. So 2 weeks of appropriation subcommittees, and there are 13 of those, which take a look at bills before they send them over to the full appropriations and budget committee, which actually met this week as well. A little unusual, but that's the case. And then a handful of other committees, but most of the committees actually canceled this week. And, I tease my colleagues about that, because just a reminder, we have 41 committees and 40 committees and 82 Republicans. So if you take the speaker and the pro tem out of the mix, because they serve on all committees, that means 80 Republicans, 40 committees. Every single Republican is either a chair of a committee or a vice chair of a committee. It's ridiculous. It's the GOP equivalent of the participation trophy.
Yeah.
I felt like Oprah came by and said, you get a committee and you get a committee and you get a committee. And so it is what it is. It's just silly though. We had some interesting bills come through in the States' Rights Committee this week. I was watching my colleague John Waldron do battle with those folks I lovingly refer to as the Constitutional Scholars Caucus out at the Capitol, who are convinced, that Joe Biden is the devil and that nothing the federal government does is good. But we're happy to take their ARPA money. Right. We'll vote against the ARPA money.
Just in case we mess up on the budget and we need some holes to plug, we'll take the money.
Yes. Oh, speaking of which, I'll interject, chasing a rabbit. Our treasurer, the day before, 2 days before the governor's State of the State address, issued his monthly update on economic activity and talking about how well the state is doing. And the treasurer said the reason why we're doing well doesn't have anything to do with cutting taxes or, all the other things. Has everything to do with the federal government pumping dollars into the state of Oklahoma and, sadly, inflation. Those two things are really what's driving economic output in the state of Oklahoma. And we've had a good run with oil and gas. You see it at the gas pump. Obviously, nobody wants to pay extra at the gas pump. But that does mean that oil producers in the state of Oklahoma are seeing better returns. And that's not entirely bad. Now, the part that bothers me is that the oil companies themselves, that middle layer of folks, they're turning in huge profits. We used to have a way to fix that,
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember what was called a windfall profit tax.
Mm-mm.
So windfall profit tax comes into play when your earnings, net earnings, not gross, so the leftovers exceed a certain point. So if your earnings go up 500%, well, you've made a killing,
Yeah.
and you get an additional tax on that. We no longer have that.
Hmm.
And that's noteworthy because we saw this week the release of information about the snow or the cold snap that we had a year ago. You know, we had 2 weeks where a handful of companies made $4.5 billion off the people of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was a huge windfall. And we finally got the release of some of the names of those companies. And it's appalling, not surprising, but appalling.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, the Attorney General is doing zero to get any of that money back for the people of Oklahoma.
Yeah, because that was definitely a time where a lot of electricity was used. I remember Dad complaining about the bill about that the month afterwards or something like that, and I was like, oh well, that makes sense. We were just home for like a whole week and didn't do anything. And we had all the heaters on, and yeah.
It's funny though, not everybody did, but the plan that the GOP put in place is effectively socialism, or almost approaching communism as it relates to that. So they took the total bill and they marked it up so they could sell bonds for it, and we won't go into all that detail right now. But then they split it up evenly among households. So say you were really frugal, right? And you kept your temperature in the house at 60 degrees and you wore house slippers and, you know, a jacket around the house. And I was around in Bahama shorts and, you know, tank top, and I had mine at 78, you know, so I'm really killing it with the utilities and you aren't. We still wound up with the exact same thing. And we're both going to pay for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
Shameful. Even a Republican stood up against it. You know, all three members of the Corporation Commission are elected GOP. Bob Anthony, who's the dean of the Corporation Commission, issued a blistering dissent this week as they started passing all of these plans. I'll have to send it to you. You'll look at it and you'll say, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. I was in the Veterans Military Affairs Committee this week. It was the only one of my committees that met. And we have a bill in there that basically takes the Oklahoma National Guard out from under the authority of the president and the Federal National Guard Bureau.
I'm not sure if that's legal, is it?
Oh, it is. I mean, there are other
Okay.
states that have state militaries. Legal isn't necessarily the question. Is it the right thing to do for the people of Oklahoma? And, you know, I've been talking to National Guard members who are very concerned about things like their federal retirement. You know, so if you get a retirement at 20 years and you're 18 years in and now the state of Oklahoma yanks the rug out from underneath you, right? I've invested 18 years of my life serving the country through the Oklahoma National Guard. And now I'm 2 years away from retirement, you know, that retirement benefit, and you're taking it away from me. Or what's even worse, I don't know if you know what TRICARE is. That's the federal government's health care for military folks. So it's government health care, but shh. They're concerned that they're going to lose that, you know, because the federal government's going to say, hey, these folks are no longer part of the U.S. military.
Yeah.
You guys said they're not. Well, okay, then you take care of them. You pay for their insurance. You pay for their weapons. So the airplanes that they fly and, you know, the howitzers that they fire and all of the, you know, the bullets, you take care of all those things. It's a dumb idea.
Yeah, because like, wouldn't that be like super expensive to do if that's what we would have to keep up with if we chose to keep up with their health care through the state, and also have to keep up with their weapons and also whatever housing they're possibly getting through the US government? Like, that's a lot of money to take on as a responsibility for the state if that's what we were going to do, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And the salaries are split anyway. When they're on state active duty, So, they get called up for a disaster or something, then the state is paying for the tab on that, unless FEMA has a disaster declaration.
Yeah.
But when for instance, we had a National Guard contingent that went to the Ukraine, right? And, the governor went out to go visit with them, yada, yada. Well, that's being paid for by the U.S. military, and that won't happen any longer.
Mm-hmm.
So their ranks won't be recognized by the U.S. military, which is a problem. And coordinating when we have joint activities, a good example of that is if we have some kind of we had military folks come to help our hospitals, right? Just over the past couple of weeks, we had U.S. military folks coming in, and we won't be able to coordinate or command those troops. They'll be under federal control strictly because we will no longer be part of that chain of command.
Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video.
So what is going on with those school choice bills that we're hearing about that supposedly are Speaker McCall said that he's not going to have a hearing on them or anything? Well, what's going on with those?
My own take on that, I was grateful that the speaker stood up and publicly said what he did. But I will wait until the end of session to make sure that that's still the case. I suspect there's a lot of negotiating going on right now and positioning. And so what may be today, hey, we're not going to do this, or, we won't hear this bill, come the second or third week of May, all bets are off. The House will want this piece of legislation over here, and the Senate wants this piece of legislation over here. And they'll get together and say, oh, we'll hear yours if you'll hear ours. And the next thing you know, it's the same thing that happened in the last session when we were told from the very beginning we would not hear opportunity scholarships. Those are those private school vouchers that we pay for today. We do it through a tax credit that, we're paying people back for contributing to a private school. And we were told repeatedly, we're not going to hear this, not going to hear this. And then, whoa, all of a sudden, guess what? We heard it. That was the debate where I stood up on the floor of the House and told my colleagues, we, kept being told that we're not going to hear this, we're not going to hear this. But you know what? In the end, leadership took the mine and we got the shaft. And about 30 minutes after that, Governor vetoed the only bill I had in front of him. So he said it was because my bill was too complex. It added one little paragraph to the sales tax exemptions that would have expanded a school's sales tax exemption to the support organizations. So the band boosters, the football quarterback club, the drama club. Yeah. They're as much a part of the school as if they, the school were doing it themselves, but they all go out and spend their own money.
Yeah.
And this would have allowed them to have the same sales tax exemption, but it was too complex for the governor.
That's not that
I offered to come over and read it
all.
to him. I mean, it's like 40 words, and they're small words.
Yeah, because that would have been a big deal. Because I know, especially for booster programs that aren't as popular as football or band or something like that. Like robotics, I know has boosters, and depending on what school you're at, for the most part, I know for a fact that robotics booster club probably has less money to deal with than the band, than football or basketball. So for the smaller clubs, it would have been able to help them grow and keep on a lot more so than, you know, the band and basketball. So that would have been like really like that would have been huge for a lot of those smaller school organizations.
Yeah, you know, where I ran into it was with our local middle school. I was the president of the band boosters when my kids were in middle school, and discovered that, you know, we're going to sell blue and gold sausage, right?
Yeah.
Discovered that even though it was a school fundraising activity, we had to pay sales tax on that. And so you buy $10,000 worth of sausage that you're selling, and you have to pay $750 in taxes on that $10,000 purchase. Well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, when, you know, the band is making about $1,800 off of that whole process.
Yeah.
Closer to 2,000. But so your $2,000, 750 of it is eaten up in sales taxes. Well, that's a problem. So we went to the tax commission and said, hey, why can't we do this? You know, and they said, well, sorry, you're not the school. So I said, well, maybe we can fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of my colleagues agreed. Both the House and the Senate voted overwhelmingly in favor of it.
Yeah.
I guess they're savvy enough. It wasn't too complex for them.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. Let's see. So what bills are you proposing this session?
Well, I've got several that are probably non-starters. Let's start with the transparency bill. So I've got a bill running right now that if a core function of state government, so think education, right, is outsourced to a third party, think Epic Youth Services,
yeah,
hypothetically,
yeah,
then the company that it's outsourced to is under the same rules for transparency as if the state were doing it itself. Right. So they're subject to the Open Records Act and, you know, kinds of discovery, have to turn over all that stuff. So that's one I'm proud of. Unfortunately, I'm hearing it's not going to be heard. So, yeah. I'm a firm believer that if it's being done in the name of the taxpayers and with taxpayer dollars, then it ought to be just as if the government were doing it itself. Whatever the rules are.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to circumvent the rules just because you're private business. And, you know, the bill is not set up to pry into any of your other functions as a small business or a big business, you know. It's specifically those activities that you're doing in the name of the people, on behalf of the people, with the people's money. I have another bill that's a transparency related bill that deals with the top 1% of earners in the state of Oklahoma. So this would require the Oklahoma Tax Commission to publish their net effective tax rate. You know, you and I are probably paying 4.5%, right? I'm willing to bet they're probably not paying that much percentage wise.
Yeah.
And it also requires the Oklahoma Tax Commission to publish all of the deductions that are used and the total dollar amount that those folks are saving with those deductions. It all stems from a couple of conversations I had with some constituents as I was talking about some of the tax deductions and tax credits that we were passing. And, you know, I explained to them, these tax credits don't apply to you because you don't make nearly enough money.
Yeah.
And really? What else is going on out there? So, well, maybe we ought to just publish all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people of Oklahoma can decide, not behind closed doors in some smoke-filled room, not a bunch of politicians, who are getting donations from all of these people. But Oklahoma working families can sit back and say, should we be really giving them $93 million in tax credits for, this kind of investment in the state of Oklahoma? Maybe we'll look at it and go, oh my, we absolutely want to do that.
Yeah.
I suspect with a lot of them, we're going to be looking at them going, I don't know. That's a great deal for Oklahoma. There's a sales tax exemption on equipment for repairs to high-end luxury airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
You and I go to the grocery store, we pay sales taxes on our groceries, right?
Yeah.
But the guy who's flying that, Gulfstream jet, he goes and gets repairs on it, doesn't pay a dime in sales tax on any of that stuff. Why is that?
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Like, who's even thinking about that? Like, who's thinking those people, they need a tax break on that thing specifically that only like 5 people in the state can buy?
I will give you the rationale for that. So the rationale, as I understand it, is if we had sales taxes on it, they would do that business elsewhere. They'd have their, airplane worked on in whatever state that isn't going to charge them sales tax. So there's, something to be said for that. But yeah, it's a choice I think the people of Oklahoma ought to make. At least be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a bill on the election side of things that deals with unopposed incumbents. Understand that in your area that the incumbent does have an opponent that's declared and will be filing in April. Yeah.
Yes.
We won't go into those details, but in the last general election, 46 out of the 126 available seats were unopposed. So those 46, that's 40%.
Yeah.
They won by default. Nobody voted. What kind of a democracy do we have where people go into office without being voted on? It's shameful.
Yeah.
So my proposal says, if you are an incumbent and you are unopposed, then you stand for retention, just like a judge. And if you don't get at least 50% of the vote, then you advance to a special election, right? Where anybody in your district can file against you. And, I've heard folks say, well, why would you do that? That's just wasting the taxpayers' dollars. Well, the reality is most of my colleagues who run unopposed are probably doing well enough, staying in contact with their community that they're going to get 50%. It's not a huge barrier. And the ones that don't get 50%, you get 35%. Anyway. Yeah. The people in that district are going to go, well, wait a minute. Only 35% of the people said they want to keep that person.
Yeah.
I'm going to go run against them. Right. So, there'll be a handful of those where it happens. And, the best result coming out of that would be that all incumbents work hard in their communities to stay connected to their communities and make sure they're doing the best that they can to represent the interests of their community. Then they don't have to worry about it. We won't have a single special election at all. But they're worried about being on the ballot. The old joke at the Capitol is, the best election is the one where you're not on the ballot. Right. And that's, again, why be afraid to have people vote up or down?
Yeah.
You're doing a good job, people will keep you. If you're not doing a good job, you shouldn't be kept. And I have several others that are constituent requests. One deals with the benefit subsidies from the state for state employees that indexes them to the cost of healthcare. I have a constituent who brought to my attention that she's losing about $4,000 in salary as a result of the rising cost of health insurance, her health insurance premiums. And she wanted me to do something about it. So that's how we're going to do it. If the cost of your health insurance premiums goes up, then we're going to raise the subsidy amount. So that was causing some heartburn because, we're worried about the rising cost of healthcare. And well, okay, why don't we fix that? It's not just Oklahoma employees, our state employees. It's everybody in this state is suffering because of the high cost of healthcare. Except the National Guard folks who have TRICARE.
Yeah.
Who have government healthcare.
Yeah.
Actually, TRICARE works like insurance. So, they still wind up with, a lot of the same hassles that we do. But I have 13 bills that are filed. The max that you're allowed to have heard on the floor is 8. But at this point, I think I don't have any that will make it to the floor. It's okay. As the floor leader, half of my job is helping my colleagues with their bills. So give you a good example of that. Mickey Dollins and Ken Luttrell are co-authoring a bill. Ken's actually carrying the bill that deals with chaining up dogs. Mickey had run this bill last session and the session before, and it didn't get any traction. So this time he got with Ken Luttrell, Republican, to see if together they could work on it. And right now, the bill's not scheduled to be heard in committee. It's in the Ag Committee. And I suggested to them, there were 2 other bills in the committee that are already scheduled to be heard that deal with dogs. And maybe what they ought to consider doing is amending one of those bills to add their language.
Yeah.
It's a dog related bill anyway. So we'll see if that happens or not. But that's, part of what my job is, just kind of taking a look at the lay of the land and saying, how can we best advance the things that we're trying to do? Representative Goodwin has a bill dealing with descendants of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and a scholarship that the state has available for the descendants. And we're trying to get that one heard in committee. So I've reached out to the chair of both the Education Appropriations Committee as well as the full A and B committee, requesting, just a little bit of time to sit and visit with them. Apparently there's some folks who have some heartburn over it, and we're just trying to understand why and what we need to address to make it work for the rest of the members.
Okay.
I may have said this on your show, but I tease people that my job is to be like Michael Jordan, not to be the best basketball player on the court, but he was, but to make everybody else on the team better. It's the Scottie Pippens and the, all the others, Dennis Rodman on his, those folks who were marginal players until they got to play with Michael Jordan, and then they turned into superstars on their own right.
Yeah.
I'm just lucky I got a bunch of superstars already to start with.
You have a dream team of legislators in your office. Yeah.
We are small, but we are very passionate, and, just a lot of great ideas. And I wish that we all spent more time listening to each other on the floor, because I think we would make better decisions. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or anything?
Cindy Bird released an audit this week.
Yeah.
Of the administration's purchases during COVID. And it's just a 26-page blistering audit of so many areas of mismanagement, starting with there are constitutional provisions that prevent the state from doing prepayments on anything. We always pay after receipt, and except in this case, we didn't. The governor appointed his buddy, Gino DeMarco, who had zero experience in procurement and inventory management, anything else, to be responsible for doing all of the purchasing and all of the inventory management. He worked outside of the agencies that he was supposed to be working with. We had contracts. The state is still missing about $5.5 million worth of PPE that we paid for and we never got. We awarded single source contracts to, in one case, $750,000 to a group of people who used to work at Sonic and knew somebody within the administration. And so they got this, juicy contract to build this little inventory thing for the state. Yeah, they made out like bandits. So the guy who was signing off on all of these things was not he was the Secretary of Health for the state of Oklahoma, Jerome Lockridge. Well, in Oklahoma, cabinet secretaries have no authority. They're coordinators on behalf of the governor, but it should have been the commissioner of health who was signing off on all this stuff. So that was a big violation. Oh, here's another one. So at the beginning, we didn't have a system in place. We chose not to use the system that we had for tracking inventory. So we have all these invoices coming in and deliveries being made and things. So they decided to track it all in a spreadsheet. And they let anybody access the spreadsheet. So anybody could go in and change stuff whenever, Oh, wow. So yeah, there's no accounting, no control, no accountability on this thing. And then come April, end of April in 2020, they finally got an inventory system in place and they didn't put any of the existing inventory into it. So we had no record of what we already had, how much we paid for it, whether we actually received it or not, none of that. It's just a complete mess. And the unfortunately unsurprising, but just awful things coming out of this was the Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma was going to bury that report because it's so damaging for the governor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just full of corruption. And of course, the Attorney General right now is the hand-picked guy from the governor.
Yeah.
After our former one stepped down. And so he doesn't want to make his boss look bad. But who he works for is not the governor. He works for you and me.
Yeah.
He's responsible to the people of Oklahoma. Well, it's a good thing Cindy Bird, our state auditor, did her job. And she said, well, you know what? Even though he says he's not going to release it, I am. Taxpayer dollars were used to produce this, used to investigate, and the people deserve to know. Which fits into the bill I was talking about earlier. Yeah, that kind of nonsense where we do these investigations and then we bury the results because they're going to make somebody elected look bad. Yeah. Shame on us. Government is supposed to work for the people, not work for the people in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that, but I hadn't looked too much into it because it seems pretty complicated in a way because, the bearing of the stuff and then we don't know where things are and then what is it that we were supposed to get and then how much what this.
I'm going to take one more pot shot at the Attorney General. So, Cindy Bird was investigating Epic Youth Services, right?
Yeah.
And she issued a damaging audit, found all kinds of mismanagement and redirection and embezzlement, et cetera, right? Not my words, hers.
Yeah.
And then turned it over to the Attorney General, who did nothing.
Yeah.
And in the time since she turned it over to the Attorney General, those guys made another $80 million. That's money that should have been going to the kids at Epic Charter Schools.
Yeah.
But it went to those two guys who, by the way, one of them just donated to the governor's campaign. Yeah.
Wow.
It's obscene.
Yeah, that's wow.
And the attorney general, finally, after we called him to task for it, the Democrats have been yelling and screaming about this since the release of the audit. But we issued a report issued a statement standing with the state auditor. And then 2 days later, the attorney general says, well, I'm going to turn it over to the district attorney in Oklahoma County, David Prater. Dude, why didn't you decide this 7 months ago?
Yeah.
$80 million ago.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
One weekend and I'm depressed and, already worn smooth. Going to be a long session.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking forward to keeping up with all of it.
You got your list of books that you're going to have to burn and librarians that you're going to have to burn with them and teachers for, teaching that social emotional learning.
I know, right? It's
Have
my
you looked at
state
that
senator that it was, yes, I believe it was Shane Jett that authored that bill.
Yes.
So it's my state senator. And
do you know what it prohibits teachers from teaching? Grit, self-determination, self-motivation, resilience, resolve.
yeah,
and
how to deal with their emotions and
how can you have a football team without
right?
teaching grit, right?
Yeah. I don't even see his rationale for it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
at all.
It's just completely asinine. And the most frustrating part of it is public schools are expressly forbidden from teaching that stuff. Guess what kind of schools aren't? Private schools.
Yeah.
Private schools are perfectly fine to teach your kids grit and self-determination and resolve and, self-motivation, delayed gratification. But public schools, we can't teach those things.
It's wild.
Yeah. It's like CRT. The only place in Oklahoma right now where you can teach CRT, private schools.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, how all their bills are literally just aimed at public schools. Nothing about private schools and how they operate at all. Just public schools. That's
what.
it.
Yes and no. So, you hear all the time out at the Capitol, we can't tell private schools what to do. They're private schools. We don't, except we tell private schools that and public schools, we tell all schools today that they are not allowed to bring in a kid who has a communicable disease. Right. And Kevin West is running a bill to remove COVID from that. So if your kid has COVID, he can't be sent home from school. All right. But what he's leaving in there is the language that says if your kid has lice. All right. So I can, tell private schools that if a kid has lice, they're not allowed to have the kid come to school. But I can't tell them anything about CRT or SEL and we had a bill on epilepsy and helping teachers understand what to do if a kid has an epileptic seizure. And I was told, well, we can't tell private schools what to do. Yes, you can. We absolutely can. We do. You just don't want to tell them this.
Yeah.
You just want to make it harder on public schools so that people will choose private schools. Shame on us.
Yeah.
I keep saying that over and over again. Maybe that's going to be my mantra for this session. Shame on us. Yeah. We get to the end and people will take a victory lap and they'll go print their little postcards with their stupid bills that, do nothing for the future of Oklahoma. And they just are there to help them get reelected. And I'm going to be standing back saying shame on us.
As you should, because definitely. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for coming on. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Where can we find you on social media and anything else you would like to leave us with?
Okay. So I did create a new Facebook page, an additional one
Okay.
for my state presence. So you can go to facebook.com/rep Andy Fugate. That's the official page. And that's where I'll be posting debate videos and certain things like that. And then my candidate page is facebook.com/Fugate, the number 4 HD94. And that's where really the bulk of what it is I do. Out on the web, I'm www.andyfugate.com. On Twitter, I'm just a Fugate. So I was one of the early folks getting on Twitter. I got a friend who's a 2-letter Twitter handle, which is, he was one of the early guys. So.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Wish I could just have 3 or 2. I think you could do 3 still, right? Or does it have to be like
no, they've all been
now?
taken up.
Yeah.
You know, there was a land grab that was done on that. And so
Yeah.
when I was in technology, part of my job was being early onto a lot of these platforms. And so, you know, I'm Andy.Fugate on Gmail, and so, you know, things like that. But these days, you know, I'm probably last to Snapchat, last to Instagram, last to TikTok, and because I'm not keeping up with any of it anymore. It's not my job.
Yeah.
And besides, I look terrible when I dance.
Hey, people
You're
do a lot
probably
of stuff. No, I'm not good at dancing.
Yeah.
No, people do a lot of other things on TikTok. Like they've made the videos on TikTok able to be longer now. I think now they can be 3 minutes. So, you know, it's easier for people to post, you know, other types of things like snippets from debates or from speeches and stuff. So it's, you know, more than just dancing and little trends like that and all types of other crazy stuff. I haven't really been on TikTok a lot lately. I don't even know what's going on there, but I know
I'm finally on there, but mostly I just look at it and think, oh, why? I really don't want to see a video of some guy getting a pimple popped, or, you know.
No kidding, right? Like I was just like, no, you need to find your algorithm, because like I remember whenever I was on, it was more like a year and a half ago, whenever I was on consistently, I would get mostly videos about heavy metal and rock music, and I would get videos about politics and history, and then a lot of videos with teachers and stuff like that. So like that was what was in my algorithm.
See, I would rather be programming the algorithm.
Yeah.
That's more my fun.
Yeah.
I'm not much of a, you know, I like to read a lot, but I'm not as good an auditory learner, or, you know, that kind of stuff. If I'm watching visually, mostly just puts me to sleep. So, oh well. Thanks for having me on tonight.
You're welcome.